I hope everyone is enjoying the event so far. Here we are with our third Q&A panel, and I want to jump into the questions, but first introduce everyone that's on the panel, all of the speakers that you've heard so far over the last hour or so. We have joining us from TLVTech, Daniel Grolowski. He's the CEO. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Michael.
Next, we have Dr. Ryan Ries. He is the Chief AI and Data Scientist over at Mission Cloud, a CDW company. Welcome, Dr. Ries.
Hello, everybody.
And next, we have Chris Rodgers, who is the founder and CEO at CSP Agency. Chris, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And rounding out our panel, we have Maher, who is the founder and CEO over at M7 Innovations. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
And I see we have quite a few questions that have come in from the audience from all around the world. So I will try to touch on some questions from different individuals at the live event. So let me just start right off with a first question that came in from here in the US from, this is for Chris. This is from Jenna, who is just outside of Portland, Oregon. And Jenna is asking, when 89% of B2B buyers use Gen AI for research, how do you convince skeptical CMOs to invest in geo now instead of waiting for best practices while their brands quietly disappear from AI answers?
Yeah, that's a tough one because ultimately each brand is going to have to decide where they sit with this. The truth is we don't have best practices. We have a certain amount of data that we have today. There are techniques and strategies that we know we can apply and that we can get results around. But there's a lot that's still being figured out. So I think the question needs to be posed on if they want to get ahead at a time when there is this opportunity. But it is early adopters. So part of what you can do in that situation is you could do some competitive research to see where you are falling versus your competitors. And you could track that over time. So we do some of those audits on our end to be able to see how brands are actually appearing within the LLMs. There's a lot of variation within those things, certainly. But I think starting to look at data and seeing those trends may be how you get in with executives and stakeholders, because they're going to care about where they're stacking up with competitors and how things are moving in their space.
Yeah, and I guess if they gave away the answer to how to get into the results, that would be changing the rules of the game, right?
They definitely don't want SEO 2.0.
No, not at all, not at all. So I think we've been there already. So the next question came in for Dr. Ries, and this is from Alex, who's in Chicago, Illinois. And Alex asks, when you explain that only 5% of Gen AI pilots show clear ROI, but many still reach production, what is the first correction you make to an executive team's mental model so they stop calling everything a failure?
Yeah, I think a lot of this goes to just the marketing world, right? You're hearing people out there saying, hey, I'm implementing coding tools. I should see a 5 to 10x increase in what's going on, right? And these numbers that people talk about are ridiculous. And it goes to that MIT article as well, where the 5% was that had appreciable ARR, meaning, multiples on the ARR, where many examples showed, maybe it showed a 10 or 20% increase, right? Not these 5 to 10 X's. And, 5 years ago, before Gen AI, everyone in the world would have been jumping up and down if you saw a 10 to 20% increase in efficiency and productivity. But today it's like, what? That's it? That's all you got? And so it really comes down to trying to reframe it and make sure people understand that, like, you can't be unreasonable, that, yes, there was all this marketing that went on, but that marketing like all marketing is mostly lies, and you have to just reframe that point of view and be like, look, we got 10 to 20% increase. Like, that's huge for most businesses. It's just, those executives are listening to the news of 5x, 10x, and it's just they just feel it's failure because they're not seeing the numbers that are pretty much lies from everything I've seen.
Now, this next question is for Matt. And Matt, I correct me if I'm wrong. I think you were there when that study was released, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the MIT study, that one got a lot of press,
Yeah, absolutely. But so this question comes to you from right in New York City, from Caroline, who's asking this. You described 2026 as the year of assessment. What's the single most important ROI narrative you want CMOs and CFOs to align on so AI budgets survive the current scrutiny cycle?
Great question, Caroline. I would say you want to make sure you're heading in the right direction. I think Dr. Ries made a great point too, that when you think of like measuring marketing or things, a lot of it is a lot of sizzle, not a lot of steak. And it's really hard right now to have a clear delineation or a clear line of attribution to say we did X with AI first search and now we got Y result. It just doesn't happen. But you want to make sure you're at least trending in the right direction to say, what are we doing with our semantic association on our site? Are we side loading a site for agents? Is that going to be cloaking? Is that going to be an issue? So all these things where at least you're moving in the right direction. I don't believe traditional search is ever going to go away. Google is still massive. At the same time, when we think of AI first search or the aperture of the internet starting to shrink, you want to do everything you kind of can to be prepared. So the example I'll give is when we start to think of these protocols that are coming out, Google's Universal Commerce Protocol for shopping. They also have a agents protocol for agentic shopping. We have Anthropic, OpenAI. I tell brands or C-level suite to, you don't need to bet the whole farm on one protocol because we don't know what's going to win. But if we start to get ready for all of these, we will have outsized gains in the future. So hard to draw a direct line for attribution today, but as long as you're heading in the right direction, it will be easier tomorrow to measure and get those dividends from these investments you are making.
This next question is for Daniel, and this comes to us from Megan, who's just outside of San Francisco, California. And Megan asks, when you say AI works but the company doesn't, what's the earliest signal during a pilot that organizational politics or ownership gaps, not the model, are going to block production rollout?
Good one. So I think to tap on what Matt says, right? In addition to being in the right direction, or one side product of it, right, is starting to instruct the team, right? Having that culture, right? Because people are afraid of what they're not used to. And, everybody are talking about the jobs are going to be different, the companies are going to look different, right? So then they just go and leave it aside. Now, typically, or philosophically even, right, in large revolutions, right, the mobile revolution, the internet revolution, .com, you would see that there is the product companies, the revolution product companies who are innovative first, right? These Claudes, OpenAIs of the industry. Then after that, there is a lot of confusion, right? And the first one to innovate are actually services companies who make a living off being inside revolution, inside innovation, right? And then after that comes the product companies. So right now, what we're seeing, or what I'm hearing you asking, Megan, is why don't product companies innovate before, right? And I think it's not the stage yet. I think that there is a lack of knowledge. There is a lack of confidence around AI tools and how it works and what are the dangers of it. And I think the first step is going to be to educate the team, right? And to kind of unlock it and say, you know what? Nobody knows what's going on, right? There's a lot under the hood. There's a lot of macro differences. Things are moving. These are tectonic plate movement right now, right? So nobody knows what's going on. But if we don't tap into that, and if we don't learn and use it to also improve ourselves individually, then it's not going to work out, right? And then once you eliminate this cloud around AI, then everybody are on board, aligned, right? And then you can actually talk about production and value.
Fantastic. The next question came in for Chris, and this is from Sophia, who is in Barcelona, Spain. And I think this question is probably relevant for a lot of organizations at the event today. Sophia is asking, for a European B2B manufacturer trying to win in AI overviews globally, how do you balance localized geo efforts with the need to present a consistent narrative to LLMs crawling content across markets?
Yeah, that's challenging for sure. Ultimately, I would say you have to dial down into some of this into classic SEO and how you're dealing with localization and the content that you have across all of those different areas, right? And ultimately, a lot of what we're getting picked up within AI overviews, there's still a strong correlation with what we have in the traditional index. So the other thing that I would keep in mind here is that when we look at AI overviews and the value of AI overviews, they are not all created equal. So when we look at informational queries that are at the top of the funnel, I would argue that the visibility that you get within those AI overviews is fairly limited, right? The same holds true, I believe, in the LLMs as people are going through the buyer's journey. It really comes down to commercial queries at that stage where that value lies. So when we look at localization, certainly we've got to go in and address those individual markets. But I think really focusing in on commercial queries at that middle of funnel, bottom middle of funnel is key so that you actually get the value from AI overviews, because you're really not going to win with top of funnel content if you're trying to ultimately drive ROI and revenue.
The next question comes to us for Dr. Ries, and this is from Priya, and Priya is in San Jose, California. And Priya asks, in your AI road mapping sessions, what questions do you use to quickly separate money pit ideas from high leverage use cases so stakeholders don't anchor on flashy but low value experiments?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think people have way too often fallen into the money pit because sometimes it feels easy until you get into that rat's nest and really look at, how much effort it's going to take for what value you get out of it. And I think you just have to look at how do I break down all the pieces of this use case, right? An example that I gave, it looks at, hey, I think I have a good idea because it's a report, right? Report is a classic place where LLMs exceed, but then you look at how often do I make that report, right? And if you make it once or twice a year, then you're going to lose a lot of the value there. And then if it only takes you a few hours, or a day to build it, then you're definitely clearly in the money pit area, right? Because it's going to take way more effort and way more dollars to build out that system. Now, if that report you do it once or twice a year, but it takes somebody 2 months to build it, then that's probably a pretty good use case because you can decrease that time. But where you really want to start is just finding use cases, looking at how repetitive they are, how manual they are, and whether or not they fall into where LLMs exceed, right? Is it documents that you can read and evaluate? LLMs still have a pretty hard time evaluating tables and other stuff, and so you may get into a real mess if you're trying to do a lot of table stuff that might be better served with classical BI or reports. I've seen people out there saying dashboards and reports are dead, and people will just come in the morning and they'll ask questions to their LLM. Well, to me that's crazy. Like, I want to come in and I want to see my dashboards. I don't want to sit there and have a conversation with an LLM and try to remember what dashboards do I want to look at, right? Like, I want it to show me the dashboards and then be able to ask questions of why something's not the way I expected it, versus let me just talk to the system. So, I think there's a lot of pieces you just have to look at there and just walk through what's the manual effort here. is it really going to be something that is LLM? Is it going to be something that could be traditional ETL and BI work? It really, these sessions are designed to look at that and define it, because that's still a really good use case, even if it is traditional BI. It may not be as sexy for somebody to talk about, we're doing all this stuff with LLMs, but it's probably going to offer more value for your business than building out that LLM use case.
The next question is for Matt, and this comes to us from Ethan, who's in Seattle, Washington. And Ethan's asking, your elimination of variance analogy suggests model parity. How should enterprise leaders rethink advantage when everyone has access to similarly capable LLMs and image models?
So I love that question, and I think the space moves so fast that the whole concept of elimination of variance is, yes, a year or two ago it was OpenAI was in the lead, and then Google caught up, and all of a sudden Anthropic's here, and we kind of got to this point where you can't really go wrong using Claude versus GPT versus Gemini. They're all great. To what Dr. Ries was saying before, it's like, do you have a use case? What are you trying to solve? What are you trying to get through? And you can apply whichever one of those, and yes, maybe one is 98% gets you there and the other one's 97.5, but the fact that you went from 1 to 2% to 97 or 98 is really the delta that you wanted to collapse, which is great. So it's more of the one thing that they also have in common is they are getting very, very expensive. I've had many of my own employees ask for more usage on Claude or some of these different tools. So I think that can be a major differentiator to start to understand, okay, if there is a parity amongst the output of these tools, what's the best enterprise deal I could get for the most amount of seats? Who can I give a premium seat or make a super user and get a better return investment there versus a blanket of AI? Say your whole company has Copilot at a lower tier, so you're raising or upskilling an entire workforce, but then you have your super users on a much higher tier that's much more expensive, but you don't want to buy 30,000 seats at $300 a seat for your entire company because that's cost prohibitive. So because it moves so fast, I don't think you need to have over loyalty to any certain one. I would say, don't sign 10-year, locked in deals that you're going to be locked into, an Anthropic or an OpenAI, because we just don't know if there will be outsized gains in the future. But again, go back to what is the problem you are trying to solve and try to find the best one that works with your enterprise to apply that to. But no, there's a huge difference between 0 and 1. Just make sure you are using these tools, because there's a massive difference between not using them at all versus using any one of these three, which will give you an advantage.
Daniel, the next question is for you, and it comes to us from Jonas, who's in Copenhagen, Denmark. And Jonas is asking, when you insist on having a single accountable champion for an AI project, how do you structure incentives and responsibilities so that person can bridge business, legal, and engineering without burning out?
I love this one. Right. So what's happening in the world right now is very interesting, right? So when I grew up, right, there were the cool kids and the nerds. Right, and the nerds used to play video games. They used to love technology, used to be passionate around innovations and startups. And at this point, it's safe to say that everybody are nerds, right? Everybody are somehow touching technology, and are passionate about it. And I'm hearing from friends who are outside tech saying, "Have you heard this new Opus model or whatever?" Right, and I think where we see it right now, we also see it on a budgeting level. Right, because things start to get infused or budgets are starting to be distributed, right? So historically, if you would think about a company budget, you would have a lot of tech tasks around different departments, right? And then you had the R&D team, which is the center, right? So think about it like an octopus, right? Like a reverse octopus where the legal team needs tech advice or tech assistance, and the marketing needs tech assistance and operations and all that. And then there is a bottleneck. So what's happening right now is that each department, or even at some companies, we see each individual gets an R&D budget, right? And then you say, you keep doing what you're doing, but then here's an extra $1,000 a month or $10,000 or $1 million a month, right? to go and automate processes, to start being more lazy, or to give better production, right? And then when you take a large tech project, you are going at a single person, right, who has the orchestration skills, right, to make sure that they can orchestrate between legal and ops and marketing and everyone, right? And then you hold them accountable, but you still have the structure or the format where each team have their own R&D budgets. And then you go and you incentivize and you charge different departments, right, based on what they need from you or what you need from them, right? And then it's almost like a supermarket, right? You speak to different departments and you pay to different departments and you charge from them, right? And then everything aligns, right? Because you have one person who needs to get this train from point A to point B, right? And then you have a lot of different units, right, with little gas on the way, right? So then you go to department A, you gas it up. You go to department B, you gas it up, and eventually you are the one accountable, but you have all the resources with your team and with other teams to make it happen.
Then next.
Well, I want to follow up on that because I think both Matt and Daniel are making a point that I've been making lately, where AI is kind of breaking up into two pieces. You have what I like to call personal productivity, which are co-works and co-pilots and these things that will help your employees do some of their work. It may not be work that has value to your business, but it's valuable to them personally. Like they can get through their emails, right? Or get through their Slack messages, but that may not be productive to your business. And then what Daniel said, you want to still have money to do automating your business problems, right? Mm-hmm. So like your business solutions are very different, right? Like there's a lot of things you're never going to run in Cowork or Copilot, right? If you're a loan processing business, you need to build a process that's using the underlying infrastructure of your cloud or on-prem that has that entire automated workflow. That's not going to happen in Cowork or Copilot. So, you need to understand that there are big differences between I enable somebody to do co-work and the work they're going to be able to do there versus I built out, this automated platform for my business. And so it's important to keep that in mind when you're thinking about how I'm going to enact AI, because just enacting Cowork or Copilot may not help your business at all. It'll make your employees happier. They'll get through their emails and their Slack messages, but it may not improve any of the business processes at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a great point there, and I think something that everybody at the event today is seeing firsthand. So I think that's very timely. Chris, next question comes to us from Marcus, who's in Atlanta, Georgia. And Marcus is asking, in your human first geo framework, what's the most effective way to get sales and product teams to help you surface real buying situations instead of just handing over a keyword list?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have a very in-depth discovery process that we do with the teams that we're working with, but oftentimes they're reaching back to sales to get transcripts, to get pain points. Any persona work that has been done across different business units can also be leveraged there. So really any real world data that they have, and the sales side of it is especially relevant. So anything with transcripts, anything that's been noted within CRM systems can be extremely valuable. Again, we've got a process that we go through where we're asking a lot of those questions to understand positioning, understanding who those customers are. And then there's a lot of data that can be pulled in from ad platforms and other systems where they have some intelligence, and we can use that. But any of that firsthand real world data is extremely valuable. So.
Yeah, so really setting up a continuous loop of information to inform the decisions, and I think it's one of the other challenges that I think a lot of organizations are seeing is just the volume of data is growing exponentially. But on the flip side of it, one of the things that LLMs are great at is drawing insight from large sets of data. So that is that's interesting.
Yeah, one of the key things there, because that human first geo framework ultimately, as you identify those customer buying situations, the key there is that it's being aligned with the organization's strategic business goals, where they have important prioritization across whether it's product lines, service lines, different solutions, and that you are aligning that prioritization. That's at the persona level too. So just getting to the point there that you have to whittle down, because if you boil the ocean in this instance, you're going to end up with way too much data. You're not going to have targeting that is actually going to drive outcomes that matter. So that refinement and prioritization is absolutely crucial, especially as you get into prompts, because if you're talking about a keyword, you could have 100,000 prompts that comes out of it. So that prioritization, that alignment is critical.
Dr. Ries, this next question comes for you, and this is from Anika, who is in Zurich over in Switzerland. And Anika is asking, as agents move from answering questions to executing goals with tools, what additional validation and monitoring do you insist on before letting an AI agent touch production systems in regulated industries?
That's definitely a pretty loaded question, because she's addressing the concern all of us have, and I think it when they talk about mythos and testing mythos, it like broke out of its box, right, and just kind of did anything it wanted. And so if you look at OpenClaw and the way people used OpenClaw, it was designed if you told it a task to try to find any way to do that task. So if you're trying to put this in a regulated industry, then obviously those kind of behaviors from your agent would be really bad, because they would try to find any way around your guardrails that you're putting in there. So you definitely need to be using the tools that you have. You definitely need to be making sure that it can't get past its security that you've put in place, right? Whether you've given it its own IAM role or things of that nature, depending on obviously which cloud you're using. But it's definitely a place that you're going to need to test a lot to make sure it can't get to that data. You might have to change your underlying data structures and things of that nature to make sure you've put in all the necessary security, because you yourself may have forgotten something that it's going to exploit. But it is a scary spot when you're looking at that, just because these tools, when you tell it to do something, do unpredictable things. And if if you go to Claude Code, you can run Claude Code in many different ways, and you can just set it into a Ralph loop to try to solve a problem, and you don't know all the ways it's going to solve that problem, right? And similarly, if you didn't create that code and you just let a coding tool create it, you have no idea how it tried to bypass any of the things that are in your system. So, I think it's in my mind extremely risky. Yeah, you have to be watching it. You have to understand how your code's being built. You have to make sure all of your roles and permissions are set and in place, so that your agents aren't going to go and violate the trust policies that you're expecting them to maintain. And right now, from all the tools I've seen out there, there's nothing that's a silver bullet here, right? Like, most people and even the companies creating these models have no idea what their capabilities are. And so it is the Wild West, in the build world right now.
Yeah, and a conversation we had in another panel, but I think it applies here as well. Rolling out these solutions in phases, and gradually expanding capabilities in real world environments versus all or nothing type rollouts. So, Matt, the next question comes for you from Brianna, who is just outside of Denver, Colorado. And Brianna's asking, when clients ask if AI is just another hype cycle like NFTs, which adoption statistics or behavior shifts do you find most persuasive in proving that Gen AI is an enduring platform shift?
Great question, Brianna. I'm also headed to Aspen in 2 days for the Speak at the Fortune Brainstorm, so maybe I'll see you there.
There you go.
I would say very different, very different. You could take metaverse, NFTs, Web3, put that in a box and punt it, or put it on a shelf somewhere. But that was definitely a lot of hype. Again, there were studies from McKinsey saying it was going to be a $10 trillion industry, but that was a lot of shininess. I would argue AI is a fundamental step change. It is not like the internet. The internet was 0 to 1. We never had a digital information superhighway. We got that, and then our whole economy and world and commerce shifted to fit into that one. AI is from 1 to 100. So it is not anything net new, but it is a massive accelerant that sits on the existing infrastructure that is our internet and our digital lives, which we spend a majority of our days on. So to what Dr. Ries said, it's about personal productivity. I think Chris and Daniel hit this too, of companies are morphing around this, and it's just about how much you will actually accelerate. We see some companies, getting 50, 60, 70. We see some, I like what Daniel said about like the cloud of AI or the fog of AI, some that are struggling to get to 5 to 10, but either way, we do see a massive step change. I do think it is like the internet in that we have not realized its full power just yet. We're still in this very use case like phase. Does this work? Okay, that doesn't work. Am I being more productive, or am I literally putting hours into a tool that's not giving me something back? I like how Dr. Ries said that I would like to look at the dashboard too, because AI in its current state is great at dumping data on me, but it is not finding any insights. That is my strategic brain that's going to find the insights, and I can do that quicker by looking at a dashboard as opposed to a one-off conversation. So will we get to a stage where AI is finding the insights? Likely. But for right now, it's just we are on this adoption curve. It is moving really fast. It is very exciting. But it's why I'll go back to what the first thing I said. You want to be going in the right direction, because if you're trying to optimize for one or two things, and I think every panelist said it in a really smart way, like, are you more productive? Are you getting more things done? Or are you just doing 5 tasks half as well right now? So it is a very exciting time, but this is definitely a technology that is here to stay, and it is not ephemeral and transient like NFTs or the metaverse.
Fantastic. And as we're coming to the end of our time on this panel, I'm going to throw the last question out to Daniel. Daniel, this is from Amir, who is joining us from Tel Aviv in Israel. And Amir is asking, in your 4 killers of AI projects, which one, tech complexity, legal, politics, or accountability, do you tackle first when you join an enterprise? And how do you make progress without stepping on toes?
Happy to see an additional Tel Avivian here. So hey Amir. So I think the first thing is accountability, right? Because you are coming as an outsider, right? With a lot of vagueness, with a lot of dynamics. It's a very fast-moving world right now. Things are changing, right? There's ego battles between I'm using Gemini and you're using Claude. Who's better? There's so much confusion around that, right? That if you don't have somebody on the inside to run you and to take you or to help you help them get from A to B, you can't do anything about it, right? Because you're going to end up with the same conversation around confusion. I mean, the conversation happening right now, especially in enterprises, right, is a lot about ego. It's about who knows better, who tried out the last tool, right? Only today we had 20 new tools going to market, right? So the conversation, especially in larger enterprises, is around ego, right? What do I know that you don't, right? And then if you come from the outside and you don't have enough ammo with you, right? If you don't have that, player by your side to help you get this ego out of the way, you're going to end up with the same ego conversation across multiple departments, right? So you have to have somebody from the inside who has the same target like you, who helps you in those difficult conversations and reminds everybody that we only have one target right now, is to increase the productiveness, revenue, profit, whatever of this company. So the first thing and the most important one is very clear understanding of who's running the show.
A very productive panel. I really appreciate everyone's time. Daniel, Dr. Ries, Chris, Matt, wonderful presentations, and really appreciate you taking the time out to answer all the questions from the audience. Now, for anyone that's in the audience, I know we didn't get to all the questions. If there are some additional questions that you had from anyone on this panel, any of the other speakers at the event or anybody on the Software Oasis team, that big orange button at the top of the site, just submit any questions that you have, and we'll be sure to get you in touch with everyone to help out. But with that, I'd like to thank everyone on this panel, and we're going to head off to the next speaker. So take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
So much.
Is that
Bye-bye.
Thank you.